Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to the series God's Plan for Me as we explore God's best for your life. Pastor and leader Zachary Taylor will be walking us through this series the next 6 weeks. Zach and his wife Casey have been married and doing ministry together for over 10 years in Palm Beach County and Southern California. A couple months ago, they just welcomed to the world their first child, Winter. Zach has a Bachelor of Arts in Preaching and Master in Philosophy from Talbot School of Theology. Personally, I've known Zach for nearly 20 years. He's a dynamic communicator and a great storyteller, and I hope and pray God uses this teaching to bring you closer to Jesus Christ and help you discern God's direction for your life.
Well, hey everyone, and welcome to God's Plan for Me. I'm so excited to spend the next 6 weeks with you as we tour through God's plan for our lives. And I'm super excited about this because if you walk through the last 15 years of ministry in Southern California and West Palm Beach, the top 2 questions that people have asked me is, number one, what happens when my pet dies? Does he go to heaven? The answer to that question is dogs do, and then cats go back to wherever they were from to begin with. But really, the biggest question that people ask is, what is God's plan for my life? Over and over and over again, I've been asked that question because I think that every single one of us is consumed with this question of, what does God have for me? And when I think about God's plan for our lives and for my life, I think of my best friend, Sammy. And I don't know if you have a friend like Sammy in your life. Sammy's just a great listener. He doesn't talk a ton. He just sits and listens and just watches. He just kind of jumps from thing to thing, idea to idea. I just feel like we have this special bond together. He's got this boundless energy. He's always excited, always willing to listen, always just to lend a shoulder and just let me cry next to him or just sit next to him. In fact, our favorite thing to do is to sit together and just share a bowl of nuts. This is my best friend, Sammy. Yes, Sammy just so happens to be a squirrel. And the first thing that people ask about the squirrel is, how do you find a squirrel? Well, actually, would you guys like to meet him? You want to bring him out? Here, bring him. No, I'm just kidding. He's a wild animal. That's not going to work. The way that we found Sammy was he was actually dying and dehydrated. He was maybe 3 weeks old, and we rescued him out of a parking lot. He kind of fit in the palm of my hand. That's right. You should be saying, "aw," at this moment. And we nursed him back to health, bottle by bottle, every single night, keeping him alive. And that was the first time that I saved Sammy's life. And since then, we've just been best friends. And I just got to tell you, I'm crazy about this squirrel. I'm absolutely nuts for him. I love him. I watch him every single day. We talk all the time. If you go to my social media pages, they are filled with stories about Sammy because I'm absolutely obsessed about him. I'm crazy about him. I talk to everyone that I meet about him, and I am just all about this squirrel. When he bites people, I think it's cute. He is just the best thing in the whole world. And I don't know if someone has told you this lately, but our God is absolutely crazy about you. He obsesses over you. He watches your every move. He talks to you. He talks about you to all of his friends. He thinks about you all the time. He sees the very, very best in you. Our God is crazy about you. In fact, in Psalm 139, David talks about our God and the way that he thinks about you. And here's what David writes. He says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit, you know when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar. And before a word is even on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your head upon me. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me, every step that I was going to take were written in your book before even one of them came to be." And here's my favorite part of this whole passage. David says, "How amazing are your thoughts concerning me, God. How vast is the sum of them. You think about me so much that were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you." And what David is saying is that God thinks about you so much that the sum of the number of sands in the ground around the whole world don't even compare to the number of times that our God thinks about you every single day. He's ordained every single step of your entire life. He has a plan for you. He has a plan for you. And that's exactly what this entire course is about. that our God is crazy about you, that he has this plan for your life, and that you can trust him and lean into what he has for you. And David writes this psalm. He pens these words, these beautiful, incredible words about how amazing our God is and how much love and compassion that he has for us. But watch how David ends the psalm. He recognizes how much God cares for us. And watch how he ends the psalm. This is the very last verse. He says, "Search me, God. Know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." So even though we know that God cares for us, even though we know that God may be there for us, that God has a plan for us, even though we may know that God is obsessed with us just like David does, we can still be anxious about what God has ahead for us. We could still be worried about our future. We could still be worried and anxious about what career we should choose, maybe what person we should date, who we shouldn't be friends with. We could still be worried about what college we're going to attend, or maybe even how I'm going to pass that test tomorrow. And if you've ever asked any of those questions, I want you to know two things. The first one is you're not alone. There's so many of us that are walking through those same questions in life. And number two, the thing that I want you to know is that you're in the right place. Over the next 6 weeks, we're going to dive into all that God has for us. We're going to help you discover God's plan and what he has for you. I just want to give you just a quick word of encouragement as we start this thing off. And that word is that God's got you. He's got something incredible in store for your life. He has a future and he has a hope for you. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to be anxious. And the reason why I know this is because my good friend Sammy taught me this lesson. See, I came home one day and I went to pick him out of his cage to snuggle him like I always do. Except when I got home, Sammy wasn't in his cage. And I ran around the house saying, "Sammy, Sammy, Sammy, where are you? Where are you?" And he was nowhere to be found. So I started going outside. I started running through the bushes and said, "Sammy, Sammy, Sammy, where are you?" And I'm just yelling out, Sammy. At this point, the neighbors have come outside to see what's going on. The thing that I have loved so much, my very best friend, has gone missing. And I'm screaming, "Where are you, Sammy? Where are you, Sammy?" And that's when he jumps out of the bushes and he goes, "Ooh," with his tail, which for squirrel talk means we're playing a game and I'm excited to see you. And that's when Sammy decided to dart out right in front of a car. And I had two options. I could let my best friend get run over, or I could dive in front of the car to save my squirrel. And so I stepped in front of the car. It stopped just inches from my body, and I picked up my squirrel, Sammy, and I held him close. And it was right at that moment that the neighbors saw me step in front of a car and hold up the squirrel. I said, "This is my best friend, Sammy. He just loves nuts, and we hang out all the time." And they're thinking, "Man, he's probably a little bit nuts." And that was the day that I saved Sammy's life, not once, but twice. Unfortunately, there is a second way to tell this story. And when I told some of my friends what had happened, they said, "Zach, you look absolutely like just crazy in the story." There's a few details that I left out the first time that I told it. See, when I get home, I don't know about you, but as soon as I get home, I throw off all of my clothes as quickly as I possibly can. And so I go to pick up Sammy in my underwear. When Sammy's not there, I'm so frantic, I don't put my clothes back on. So I'm barefoot, just standing in my underwear right there, going out into the bushes, searching in the bushes for my friend Sammy. And then he jumps out. The neighbors are watching me run around in the bushes. I just moved into the neighborhood, so they don't know who I am. They just know that this naked guy is out on the street running through the bushes. And then a squirrel steps out into the street. And this naked guy, who's new to the neighborhood, steps out in front of a car, almost gets hit, and then tries to catch the squirrel. But then he actually catches the squirrel and is standing there in the middle of the street, naked in his underwear, holding a squirrel, saying, "This is my best friend." It's a little bit confusing of a story. But it's still the same day that I saved Sammy's life. And here's what I know. As funny as that story is, if I would go to these great lengths to protect and save the life of my squirrel, not once, but twice, how much more would our Heavenly Father go to great lengths to protect us, to care for us, to set a plan forward in our life, something beautiful and better than we could possibly imagine. Remember that our God is crazy about you. He obsesses over you. He talks about you to all of his friends. He sits around counting the number of hairs on your head every single day. And here's what I know is God's got this. He has a plan for you. And here's my hope, is that Jesus' words in Matthew 6 might bring you some comfort if you're feeling nervous or anxious or worried about what's ahead in your future or what God's plan for you might be. Here's what Jesus says. He says, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you're going to eat or what you're going to drink, or about your body, what you're wearing. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air, or the squirrels of the trees, of course. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? God is nuts about you. He has a plan for you and for your life, and he would give absolutely anything for you. In fact, he has given everything for you. And together, over the next 6 weeks, we're going to explore and discover all that God has in store for you guys. Love you, and we'll see you next week.
I hope you enjoyed this session. We'd love for the conversation to continue. Please take some time to discuss these questions in your group, and don't forget to pick up the book, God's Plan for You.